we got a lot to get to today. A lot. And I think some of it's going to be looking back at last night. Some will be looking forward to today. But man, last night was fun. I enjoyed it a great deal. I'm sure Jay Stu is going to pick it apart and be a curmudgeon about it. And I'm guessing Dan is laughing and smiling because, he has his fantasy pod. He knows all this stuff kind of cold. And it's interesting on just how it's always like you make predictions about things and I wonder how much of them came to play. But for me, I don't know, to flip on a game, know what time it's coming on. It's also different now. I'm Central Time Zone, just different than West Coast Time Zone. Some of it good, some of it bad. But it was here in northeastern Wisconsin. We had kind of a front go through like a day and a half ago. So it was windy and rainy. It just felt like football season. I was like, yeah. And then you had the familiarity of not just Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, but they also played to their scouting report, right? Like Mahomes' first half interception was just him being loose with the football. He gave the Ravens another opportunity. And here's the frustration with Collinsworth. As a broadcaster, Collinsworth calls a hell of a game. But his lack of any sort of desire to give very reasonable criticism of Mahomes is weird. Like that last throw that Mahomes had that we crossed his body, had he simply planted his feet and pump faked and thrown the football to the left, the Chiefs win going away. Instead, he gets the ball deflected. Great play by the defense. He's off balance, makes the throw, can't stop himself, throws it into a deflection, and ends up catching his own football. And the Ravens give us everything we wanted, which was, last play, 4 seconds to go, scramble around, throw it up, back of the end zone, catch, looked like he was in, and then he just had just a toe out of bounds. Couldn't have been any better for the league. But if you were to give a scouting report on Pat Mahomes, you would have said incredibly talented, finds a way to win games. He'll drive you crazy because for whatever reason, he'll just make a careless or don't give a you-know-what mistake. But you want to be careful how much you reel in those mistakes because that creativity allows them to be great. And the Chiefs, as a team the last couple of years, kind of play with their food, right? They have a big lead, should put them away, don't. 2 drop touchdown passes. Meanwhile, Lamar Jackson, we were told last year, whole new offense. This year, added Derrick Henry, want to give him so he doesn't have to run. He has somebody else who can run. But Derrick Henry couldn't get going, and Lamar Jackson was spectacular. And when people say Lamar can't throw, it doesn't mean he can't throw. It just means that on the random second down, when he has a guy running wide open to the end zone, sometimes he'll airmail it. And he does that a higher percentage of time than anybody else who's a quality starting quarterback in the NFL. On the other hand, he's a freakier athlete than anybody who's ever started in the NFL. And he can throw some unbelievable footballs. I thought that game played right to its stereotype, including, obviously some it's not offsides. It's illegal procedure with the Chiefs' right tackle being in the backfield. There's other thoughts where the Chiefs get away with holding it home. They get away with murder. Lamar Jackson, spectacular, best talent on the field, but he's just not a consistent thrower. Pat Mahomes plays with his food, but at the end of the game, you'd much rather have Pat Mahomes than anybody else. And as careless as he can be and they can be, you tell me who's going to actually beat them when they come to the playoffs. I don't know if anybody can. Did I miss anything, Dan Byer? Did I miss anything, Jason Stewart? Did I miss anything, Chris Perfett?
I hope so, because it's 6 after.
Okay.
Here's the funny thing that I thought of last night was there was something that happened in the game that I thought that we would surely talk about today. And I didn't think it was going to be the national talk, but I thought that it definitely would be a topic of conversation. And we fell so quickly back into football mode after 60 minutes of game 1 of the 2024 season. Because we're talking about the greatness of the Chiefs. We're talking about Lamar Jackson and his ability or inability to make the throws when he needed. But did you guys notice the kickoffs? The Chiefs, they just kicked it out of the end zone, which is something that Sean Payton brought up throughout the preseason. He did not think that the 30-yard line advancement was going to deter teams from doing so, and Andy Reid showed it last night. Harrison Butker just kicked it out of the end zone, and boom. And Justin Tucker may not be Justin Tucker anymore, but that could be for a different day.
I actually think that today is that day. And it's interesting because I was sitting with my boss, with Josh Moon, and we were talking about, or he was on the phone with me and he was doing a fantasy draft, whatever. And he was drafting a kicker. And I was like, tell me you're in the last round. He's like, oh, I'm in the second to last round. I'm going to take Harrison Butker. I was like, well, that's a great pick. He's like, no, wait, I got Justin Tucker. I was like, is Justin Tucker still awesome? And last night he was not. And he's been the best kicker in the league up until the past couple of years. And it did feel like last night was hey, if you don't pay attention to these things, you may not realize that Justin Tucker still really good, but not what he used to be.
Yeah, those were kind of my minor takeaways, from what I thought could be a topic of discussion. But it ends up just going back to Lamar, and I felt like I've been a Lamar defender, and I don't know how. Last night is a tough night for the people in my camp. You take dump offs all the way down the field, so it does appear that you're moving down the field, but the Chiefs are kind of letting them have it. They couldn't get after him. Lamar looked great in eluding that pressure, but when he needed to make the throw, when the field was shrunk,
right, can't do it.
20 yards. And you don't have any timeouts, so you can't run. It was, that was tough. That was tough for my camp that says, Lamar as he is fine. He can win a Super Bowl. You just have to have some things go your way, and maybe you have to have your toe get in bounds. But the first two throws in that scenario were one that was tough. They
just weren't good enough. I mean, it's okay, and it's okay for people to say, hey, that's not good enough. Right? It's just not to be considered one of the elites of the game. And he's an elite as a runner. Like, that, in a nutshell, was the biggest fear. Like, he's been better than anyone thought he could be. But they weren't totally wrong with their perception of Lamar Jackson, which is like, it's really good, but man, can you win when it really matters? Last night they could not.
I don't even think... Like, the thought process with the two likely throws, like Isaiah Likely is a tall receiver, a tall tight end. He's going to have a size advantage. Yeah, take advantage, throw it up to him. But the first one where I think we thought that Isaiah Likely was going to miss 6 weeks because of a shoulder injury and was in 6 seconds later after the next play. But on that throw, there is so much of the end zone that is wide open that I wondered if Lamar was just throwing it away. And then he wasn't, because he was throwing it up to Likely. But in that position, if you would have seen him maybe just throw to allow Likely to come back to the pylon, there was so much room before him where he could have curled in and had the touchdown. So instead of just overthrowing him and throwing it up high because I'm going to throw it up high because Likely's the only one that can get it, it ends up going over his head. He gets pushed out of bounds and almost gets hurt.
Correct. You got to throw it. It's the right throw is to throw it so only he can get it. He just airmailed it. And, I continue to understand, and Dan, you and I were working together at the time when he wasn't drafted, by even by the Ravens in the first round. There's all this talk about it. And like, look, if you watch the tape, if you remember him against Mississippi State in his last bowl game, he was so inaccurate, and he was inaccurate in throws like that. He actually throws a nice deep ball, Throws a nice deep ball. It's the short underneath intermediate stuff where he just hasn't had the adept touch. And you kind of got to play around it. It's okay. Like, look, not all these guys have flaws. Aaron Rodgers' flaw was always he just wanted to play backyard football. He'd get out of a play too quick. Tom Brady couldn't move. Now, if Tom Brady was on his spot, he got rid of it quick, but he couldn't move. So if you could get to his spot and make him move, he was not the same player. For Lamar Jackson, he's as electric a runner as we've ever seen. And it's not that he can't throw a football, but he just has these bouts of inaccuracies at untimely moments which undo them.